I second. At your leisure. Go on.
Hello, everyone. The meeting of the Auburn Economic Development Committee will come to order. The time is 6 p.m. Thursday, March 12th, 2026. On tonight's agenda, the first on tonight's agenda, a presentation from the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission.
Madam Chair, before we begin, if I could maybe first pass some materials to my left for...
Thank you.
And let me say just a quick, as you might be aware, the Citizens Leadership Academy has begun. The town is doing that this year. And I'm scheduled for tonight. Luckily they graciously made me, I can go last. I just want to alert the committee that at some point, if we run long, we've run pretty tight meetings recently, but if we go much past 7, they might come wrangle me. So I think, I think we can take care of business in the meantime.
Absolutely.
But just to set the stage, tonight we have CMRPC here, and I'll let Joe introduce himself in a moment. I'll let Joe set the stage. He can describe what we're doing here, and then have you been able to figure out if we can get you on the screen or not?
Yeah, my apologies. Having trouble getting onto our VPN here for some reason.
All right,
it's
so we'll
stuck
work on that for the next
preparing
meeting that you're
phase.
going to come to for this. So if you don't mind, the committee all has printouts of this, so
Yeah.
we may be able to use that so we don't get bogged down with technology.
Yes, of course. No, I'm sorry. That's my bad. Sometimes the VPN seems to be fine. Other times it will not load. But hey everyone, it's nice to meet you. My name is Joe Zabowski. I work for the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. In case anyone isn't familiar, CMRPC is Auburn's regional planning agency. So we serve central and southern Worcester County, so 40 municipalities in total. We help with a range of technical assistance, everything from master plans, economic development, grant writing, public health, and so on. But today we're here to talk about the Auburn Permitting Guide project. So you can flip to the background slide on your packet there.
We need a clicker for everyone.
Exactly. I'll just motion. So just to start for the background, so it's intended to be a permitting guide for opening a business or developing property in town. In case you're wondering, what does that mean for the target audience? Generally, permitting guides of these types are intended more for your smaller business owner or developer, people who might be a little bit less familiar with the permitting process. It's not to say it can't be a resource for everyone that has to go through the permitting process, but it's not intended to, teach everything about the permitting process. You can think of the goal as trying to give people the basic information and understanding they need to be better proponents for their projects and have more productive interactions with town staff. We're trying to get people in the door with more information and understanding, and then town staff can fill in the details and the technicalities from there. And if at any point you have a question or anything, feel free to speak up and I'll stop. The funding source for this is CMRPC's DLTA program. So Paul on an application for that. The timeline is February. I realize it's March, but February to August. And then, obviously CMRPC will be working with town staff and will also be consulting with town boards and committees on the project, just to get your insight and input. All right, next slide. So just in the interest of saving time and resources, when Paul and I envisioned this project, we agreed that we'd base it off of a template of a prior permitting guide that CMRPC has worked on for another community. So in in 2024 and 2025, CMRPC worked on a permitting guide for Charlton.
And Joe, just so you know, that was been shared with the committee, so they
Yeah.
looked at that, and I've described that before, but that's,
Awesome.
thank you for the background.
No, I appreciate you doing that. And so on your slide, there's just a brief overview of the different sections of the permitting guide. So the beginning is kind of a step-by-step guide to the local permitting process. There's also a fees and timeline section, and then obviously there's the state and federal permits at the very end. And we can always discuss this at the end. I know, Paul, you also shared with them some other examples of permitting guides from other communities. There's no right or wrong way to do it, so if you have any input or feedback from looking at those other guides in the template, feel free to let me know. And that's all I have for that slide. If we want to jump to the work plan. So in March, we'll be introducing the project to town staff. Well, later this month, we'll be meeting with one of the development team meetings for that.
And make sure you guys are first, by the way.
And obviously, we're here today, and we'll also be talking with the planning board. And as a first matter of things, I think it's important to ask people if there's any, additions or subtractions they want to the template. Generally speaking, just because of the budget and scope of the project, we're going to try to relatively stick within the window of the template. But if there's additional resources or content that you think would be good to add, we can always discuss that. And it'd be good to get that up front, just so we can incorporate that later as we work on the project. And I think so. The next stage will be, I believe I have that down for April, but the months are in front of you, so I'll skip the months. But the next stage will obviously be incorporating town-specific policies, regulations, pictures, and other information into the guide, and so we'll directly consult with town staff about that to make sure it's accurate. And then once that's done, we'll distribute the guide for town staff to review, and then we'll upload it either to Adobe InDesign or Esri Story Maps. I know, there's some new accessibility regulations coming down the line concerning PDFs and websites and screen readers. So I know one other community we're working with was interested in maybe instead of a PDF doing something like a story map. So I'll defer to you all and Paul on what the end deliverable is. We can accommodate either.
Yeah, just on that note, we haven't, I think that wasn't a thing when we were initially conceiving this, but I can say subsequently, our IT department, as we're trying to, this is for your benefit too, EDC, we're trying to, there's new accessibility laws at the national level, and it comes down to the state level. But there's new requirements as far as readability. Don't ask me the technical aspects of it, but there's different requirements now. You can't just pick any old font and any old layout for documents. And so I can just tell you, I know our IT department is very much doing this in the background and working on those things. So at some point in the process, we'll probably put you in touch with them so they can give you the technical specs that they're looking for or seeking. But appreciate your willingness to make our documents accessible to everyone.
Of course. So we'll figure that out as we go. And then at the end we'll loop back around and present the final deliverables to you all and perhaps the planning board too, to get your take at the end of the day. So that's all I had for that slide. And then in terms of the questions, sorry, you'll have to remind me what the first question was. I think it's, are there any
Any issue challenges you'd like to prevent?
yes. So we can open the
Yeah.
open for discussion on that. Sorry, I'm just gonna grab my,
So Joe, while you do that, I'll
notepad.
just jump in. So this, of course, I mean, I don't need to tell the EDC this isn't a permitting board, but that said, as the EDC, you have some insights into what make a guide like this useful in our efforts to make the town more attractive for growth and development. So understanding that you're not a permitting authority, we all know that, but your perspective is valued. So that's why you're here. That's why even though you touch the process in that fashion. One of our goals is to make this more business friendly and things more accessible functionally and accessible for ADA as well. So that was the first question. So there are particular issues and challenges. And again, I don't know how in-depth that the committee has had a chance to read through the document yet.
I have a couple questions. Is this permitting guidebook for all permitting, for building and the health department, Board of Health, like for the food permits?
Yeah, the format of the guide right now is kind of everything falls under the same bucket. It's kind of like a one pathway.
Okay.
So, at the beginning of the guide, there's a flow chart that goes through each step and identifies some steps you may or may not need to do if you are or aren't opening a business. I realize, when it comes to things like restaurants, it gets very involved on the Board of Health side. So if we want to supplement it with, maybe a flyer or pamphlet that gets into more detail than the guide does for something like that, we could definitely do that. Because it does, cover at a superficial level what you would need to go through to open a restaurant, but, not in a lot of detail, just because right now it's meant to be, all-encompassing.
So then there'll be applications for all the permitting in this guide? Or is it, and would they be fillable PDF files for them to fill out?
Yeah, so within the guide, we'll probably link to department web pages,
Okay.
or I don't know what the status of online permitting is in Auburn. So we would probably link to the proper pages where people can find the applications, just because those things, are updated over time.
Okay.
I'm glad you bring that up. That has been one of the themes that other towns have emphasized is, they don't want to be updating the links all the time. So if they can get a stable link, and then they can just edit that page over time. But that's a great question. So it'll cover, permitting that's relevant to, opening a business or a development. Some permitting that is outside of that, obviously, there's things like, a dog license, or even as far as firearms, stuff like that. That's kind of outside the scope.
Right.
Certain tax abatements. Things
So
like that.
to build on that, so for EDCs that benefit. So basically anything in DDIS, Development Inspectional Services, except for will be touched by this. So that's planning and zoning and conservation, your standard land use
Right.
boards. But we'll also have, because of the economic aspect to it and what we have to deal with, we will have a Board of Health piece of it as well. Indeed, there's permitting through DPW,
Right.
which may or may not be part of this, probably not, or at least there'll be a mention of it. We'll have to talk about that.
Okay.
Because they're going to be joining OpenGov, which is our online portal for building permits currently, but we don't do it for site plans or
Okay.
special permits. So it's a tiered system, I guess, in a way.
Right.
Board of Selectmen do permits for licenses for events, and
Right,
we're not
right.
dealing with that either. So really, this is the land use boards and add in Board of Health.
Okay, thank you.
So on that same note then, after to follow your coattails, so for people with recreation and people that are having things where if you get the scope or permits required for a 10 by 10 tent are going to be a lot different than if it's a 10 by 20, and if it's in the winter and you need a heater, you have, in other words, you sort of see where I'm going, whether it's recreational, there is someone, the director has that wherewithal, and they're usually the go-between, but that would be excluded from this process.
Correct, yeah, that'll be out of the recreation department. It might be a way we can note that or point that out as the guide.
I think it would be critical, and just to have a balanced, if we're going to try to direct all of this, it doesn't make sense to consider part of the town and not other aspects of it. I think in general, I'm just trying to be fair to all the players,
Right.
and that's why I mention it. And even if it's one link
Right.
to individual that says, if you're really trying to approach this from a recreational or a carnival, I mean, I'm just throwing something out, that, you know, that link, the first thing they're going to do is try to go to the permitting guy, right? Because in their mind, we're supplying that. So then to have something where we could link towards it, I think would be a, and I bring this up because when the Chamber this year did the holiday stroll, we ran up against that. The director of the not director, director of recreation, who's been doing the that booth thing at the high school, it escapes me at the moment, the Christmas Bazaar, the craft fair, you know, they have 200 vendors, and those vendors and a lot of the permitting and everything that goes on with all of that, some people have 10 by 10 booths, that's where all of this knowledge is coming from. And so they just go after her. She's got to handle 200 booths, and she's got 90 individuals that are waiting for a booth. So I'm just thinking that, you know, if this is all in her head, and then if somebody onboards that or that goes to get transferred, we're still keeping it manual. So I figured if we're going to, and I'm not saying we just go to the to that area, but it would be good if somehow, if we're talking about links, that maybe recreation can come up with a list, and then we have a way, or a narrative, and then we have a way of putting it in here and sort of account for everybody.
You know, I think that's a good point, Patrick, and I'll just say that that's not part of the scope.
No, but it's, I didn't know, but I'm just
but-
thinking there's 200 booths, and that's a lot of people that
Right,
are going
and
to CDG, and that, you know.
Well, so this will address DCG in the guide. So that's how that would touch. I don't want to get into
Yeah.
the weeds of the DCG is, but like, so that will be part of it that way. But this is meant
I
to be-
understand what the point of this is,
yeah,
but
right.
I'm just trying to be fair so that we can let people know we're trying
absolutely.
to help as many
And
people as we
And
can.
I think even if it's outside the scope of what this specific project is, we can still mimic, if you will, after the fact.
Oh,
the
okay.
format. You know,
Okay.
maybe it won't be.
So we won't
HTRPC,
necessarally include it here, but we may be
No, I
able to
think
do
it's
something
important.
later
I
to.
think you're raising a good point. We should be mindful of that, especially on the staff level when we have that conversation. I think it's good for Joe to hear about that too. Again, whether we can incorporate that specifically in this deliverable, that's TBD, but I think it's important to be mindful of that because again, permitting covers a lot of different things, but at least there will be a section talking about our DCG, our Development Coordination Group process. So I think we can address it there and then have a link to recreation and as they build up their process.
I know that the Chamber, on another note, is trying to work with individuals. In some communities, they have these pop-up tents where these young entrepreneurs are able to work in the summer in some of these buildings, and they have a craft, or they have an IT, or they have a small business that they want to get out into the street, but they can't necessarily get rental space in front. So I know the Chamber is trying to figure out a way that they can get these small businesses up and running, and I know that will come down the road in front of our committee as a discussion, and so that's,
Yeah.
well, yeah, that's why I'm bringing it up now, because the Chamber's not here.
But I'm on the Chamber Committee and I haven't heard about it
Uh-oh.
yet. Anyway, anyway.
Well, I think what I'm trying to say is it's something that has been in the works, Paul, for quite a while, and it's having a problem getting jump-started because there are a lot of barriers.
Yeah.
Barriers to market. So, you know, I think the Chamber, and there are some some people on the Chamber that are trying to move it along, but they, you know, it's always one obstacle after another. So they're working slowly at it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, thanks for bringing that up. Those are all relevant points. You know, I think as Paul was saying, you know, I think we have to be careful to keep the scope of the permanent guide defined, because, you know,
Yeah.
you know, when we worked on the guide with Charlton, one of their concerns was it can't be too long because then no one's going to read it.
Right.
So, but, you know, we could always come back around again in the future and, you know, work on separate pamphlets or flyers for other topics. 'Cause as
No,
you
and it's
said,
good
they're
that we
all
understand the
important.
scope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to that point, I'm curious about whether, in addition to the full-scale document, part of the output of this could be a smaller summary version, a few pages of highlights that are, you know, kind of lessen the load of getting into it, and even something that could be included then in collateral or marketing, trying to promote businesses to come in and making sure that, you know, these things are not only being used as information to check off the things you need to do, but also part of the reason why Auburn's a great community to be working, because these are the things that, you know, and how we're presenting it and managing it. So I didn't know if that was also part of the potential output.
speaking for me personally, having not really met with staff about this yet, but my hope and my pitch as part of the ask for the grant was that this would be a how-to guide for a business or a developer coming in, be an opportunity for our staff to kind of review where we're at, what our current process is.
Right.
But then also, in addition to that, there would be a marketing piece aspect to it. I haven't thought yet about what.
Right, but you don't want to print this and have to go through that just to
50
get
pages.
marked.
Here's
Right.
a handout, yeah. But yeah, to have it like, to have the headlines and maybe have the headlines on on a web page with a link to the fuller
Sure.
document, or like I said, a handout or a trifold,
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, so I think that's my vision. That would be whatever we get could either have it as a piece or be adapted
Right.
from what we have.
So even to that point, like with flow charts and stuff, the possibility of maybe doing more infographic type summaries instead of that. And then also that lends to the question you talked about accessibility. Are there any multilingual concerns we should be doing with this in terms of not just English? And or are there any requirements from the state
Yeah.
point of view for that?
That's something we can, that's something definitely to consider as we go forward with this. I'm not sure if there's a requirement, but again, we want to be user-friendly as possible. We
Right.
want to exclude any populations, that's for sure.
Right?
And we're talking about an AI pamphlet, right? We're not talking about anything hard copy that would go out with a small business application, just to be clear. We're talking, this is all going to be online.
Well, no, I mean, I can envision having a
Some
stack
hard
in
copies.
the window or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think, I don't know if it'd be an automatic inclusion with a mailing, but it's something that we could talk about, for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if this
That's
is...
where your marketing thing could get in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I think, there's lots of different types of deliverables. I think this guide is more is kind of, is a little more in-depth than, a brief pamphlet, but I could definitely see the use for something like that. I know some other guides, have, checklists for certain, maybe paths you take, whether
Right.
it's a restaurant or something like that.
Reality
We
is
could
people
always...
don't read anymore.
Right.
They skim first and then they get into the details. So if you want to make sure the message is getting through, you've got to make it palatable for your audience to absorb and orient themselves into it, or else it's just total intimidation, and that leads to it being done incorrectly, incompletely, etc.
Yeah, I think usability of this was my first reaction. It was like I wanted to click and be like, I want to jump to that.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I
I think I
can't.
opened the Southwick one first, and it was just like, oh, close that thing up. It's just,
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really comprehensive though. So I mean, in terms of what I would want it to address, I mean, there's a lot in here, and I can't imagine what would be missing
I think
from a
that-
32-page guide. But I don't know.
And that is one of the challenges that now that you're speaking about it that I thought about when I first got this, is what I think is going to be difficult is you're going to have people that are going to want the answers that are going to apply to them. So it might be prudent to think of it in a categoristic way, so that way there might be some ways for people to home in on certain sections so that they're not having to start at the first paragraph and read left to right all the way through the whole document. Just a thought.
Right, so if you're going for a Board of Health permit, you don't need to read through
Half of the bill, 4
zoning
pages of the
board.
zoning
Yeah,
board, right? The
yeah,
table
right.
of context,
Right,
if you will.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is we could include an index or a FAQ or something. The guide, like the flow chart, you should be able to click on each step of the flow chart and jump to there. If for any reason that interoperability was broken or something in the document, let me know.
Can you offer an average size for some of them that you've done? Are they anywhere from 4 to 10 pages, or are they anywhere from 6 to 15 pages?
Oh,
Are
from
they-
permitting
yeah,
guides, you mean?
yeah.
Well, I think you see in some of the examples, they really span the gamut of how long they are. Some are very brief, others are longer. Like this guide in particular, the local permitting section is I think, 25 pages, and if you cut out white space and images, it's really more like 20, maybe high teens.
Pretty comprehensive.
But I think there's different ways to go about it, right? Some of the guides some other communities have are a little lighter, and it just comes down to a preference. If it's more about getting people to town staff, oh, you need a building permit, go talk to the building department. That's fine, I think, and whereas this guide is, kind of, well, here's what a building permit is, here's what you might need it for. So, it's always a balancing act for those things. The template we started with for Charlton was from another community, and that was a lot longer. And they decided too long. So we made something from scratch.
What has like the feedback been from like the Charlton or other communities? Has there been like positive feedback or like more business development that they've seen, or feedback from business owners or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We did actually recently ask Charlton, because Grafton was interested. We're working on a similar project with Grafton. They said they haven't heard anything specific from like applicants or anything yet. I guess it's been maybe like, a year or so now. But the town administrator said, it's been a good resource for town staff and to reference to people. So, and, maybe he said, on the flow chart end, if there could be something that was a little more chronological. But no, they didn't have a lot of feedback.
I think it being something for town staff to reference is just as important though. So
I can echo that, yep.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, it can also help, onboard people and understand, what department does what. I know when I had the privilege to shadow the town manager in my hometown while I was in college, and the project he had me work on was an Excel spreadsheet for permits, because he was like, people call one department and they're like, well, let me send you to this department.
Yeah.
And then they send them to another department and play a phone tag. So.
Yeah, I appreciate it jumping out to resources and websites and things. I do think if you're going to have a printed copy and it's like, the Commonwealth offers guidance and resources, and it's like a little blue link, but you can't click it when it's paper. So I don't know about like footnotes or like some sort of annex at the end that just gives you a list of, websites and things that, to me, like there are some folks that are just really old school and are going to want the paper copy. And if I can't even find where you're referencing. I think that to me would be a point of frustration. And I'm very much pro-digital on this, but like I know there are people that are going to want that, and we should be able to provide it. So just a thought. And then Paul, to that point, sort of related to what I think Patrick was going to on like when you click the link, is town staff going to have like capacity, or is this kind of like a town-wide project to make sure that like the page you're going to is maybe consistent formatting, has, kind of at least a consistency around approach and type of information that's being supplied? Like, 'cause if you're linking out to something and it's a town page, that's at least something we have control over to say, hey, you should provide the information in ABC order, so that when people land there, they kind of visually know where to look for the piece of information they're looking for. I don't know, I'm just wondering if there's going to be capacity to think about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, that's
Yeah.
we're meeting with staff next week about this, but
Yeah.
in general, it'll be either the planner or the economic development person. Right now,
Okay.
it's all me. But right,
Capacity.
yeah,
Do you have capacity?
Yeah, no, but it would be part of that role to periodically look at that.
Yeah.
Not so much for like worrying whether the state updated their links or not,
Right.
but more about
Right.
more about like when we making sure our links are hot and live and all
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
But it was not a group project in the sense that everyone's to be responsible for
Right,
it. It's not,
okay.
and everyone's not gonna be able to go, we write the works right now, everything has to go through IT, so individual staff can't make direct changes. So
Okay.
it's not gonna be, if someone put the slash over there or something.
Sure. Yeah. That makes
I haven't had the chance to review one of these. I was just curious if you find that the majority of them are department related and not individual related, so the different municipalities have kept the department name of individuals out and just more structured it towards what departments you need to go to. Or is that a constant update in case there's staff turnover? So if you want this permit, you go to this department, because every town is structured different. You know, we have people that wear different hats and people that handle certain things. So what we do in Auburn might not necessarily be set up the same way in another municipality. So our pamphlet would obviously have to make sure that if we're directing people to get work offline, that those departments are clearly mentioned.
Right, we'll have to make sure of that, but again, I'm guessing we'll probably have, we're not gonna say email Paul, we're gonna say, we're gonna say email the economic development
But
department.
yeah, I'm
Right,
just making sure all
yeah.
of that's already in place, that's all, that it's,
We haven't started it yet.
right, okay,
Yeah,
so we
yeah,
have
right,
it, so
right.
yes,
Yeah,
no. Okay,
but that's,
right.
it's a good consideration, because we don't wanna make it.
Well, I mean, I think why I bring it up is because we're issuing permits now as we speak. It's not like all of a sudden we're going to start doing them. And I'm not really familiar with the way, because everything that I did was by phone call. So when I was working with the Holiday Stroll and we were working with the chamber and stuff, and I needed information, it was always over the phone and just come in and see me, Patrick, and we'll talk through it. The paperwork was all handled without me having to tap into stuff. So that's why I'm just curious how we intend on it playing out.
Yeah, I know, in the guide right now, like in the front, they just use generic department emails, so that way if you have any staff turnover, you don't need to update that.
Right.
So,
And there's someone designated in that area that's always going to receive that communication in it. Right.
yeah.
Yeah, for example, we have Patrick's for your benefit. So if you go to the web pages, if you went to the planning page, it goes to planning@auburnma.gov. But there are several people in the town get that.
Okay.
Because on the back end, IT says, okay, these 4 people are planning at Auburn, MA. So if anything comes to Auburn, planning at Auburn, MA, I get that.
Okay.
And I think Darlene gets that as well. So,
I think some departments are set up that way. I know where I work, it's set up that way, like there's a Board of Health email and multiple people have access to it, or the building department,
And there's usually some prioritization as to who's going to respond to it so that they're not getting multiple responses, or who's going to be checking it. Right?
Yeah, because everybody has access to it, so you can see who's responded. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some of those myself, and I just wasn't sure if that was totally by design here, or if they were a little different. I never made the assumption that what happens in one town happens in all the others.
that's a good assumption.
Well, when I was here, this is how they did it.
I don't know if the committee has any other questions now. I think we're still so early in the process that in your free time, if you wanted to read through this and the other examples we saw, if there are any ideas or cool features or something that jumped out at you, there's still time to have that as part of the process. So, but I certainly wanted this group to get a look at this, and I think probably sometime over the summer, there'll probably be a draft of some kind that we can review as well as we begin to wind down the project. But I already thought of some things that we hadn't thought of before. So especially some of Patrick's thoughts about the events and whatnot. How to capture.
Well, he
that.
said small business, and if we're trying to attract small business, that's going to be a great way to do it. But there's other areas where I think people are still sort of stuck, because when you're a small business, some small businesses have different needs than others. They're not following the normal trend of permitting that others are.
Sure. And just commenting on the other questions on the slide there, if there are additional resources like, the chamber or things that we want to link to, we can do that. And then also, to your question earlier, if we do want to engage with, businesses or like recent permit applicants, on what would have helped them.
That'd be a good topic
consider
for the chat next week with the staff, because they would have some ideas about that.
Right, yeah, sounds good.
Well, I guess if there's nothing else, Joe, thanks for coming down tonight. I guess I'll see you next week, and we'll work on the technical things in the meantime. But I think we'll have you back probably sometime over the summer when we get to a later point in the process.
Awesome.
Thank you in advance for your help.
Of course.
so much.
Thank you for hosting me. It was great to meet you all.
Likewise.
still good. I hear them talking. They're good.
Oh, so moving along on the agenda, we'll continue our discussion on developing objective criteria for tax factor at tax classification.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I included this, I know we had talked at length about this pretty much for most of the last meeting, but I don't know if I wanted to put it back on it because we never actually got to a, hey, what are our next steps exactly kind of situation. So I didn't want to leave it off with the thing, maybe there's nothing to really discuss tonight, maybe there is, but I didn't want to let the opportunity to go by given that we had that conversation last month. I know we haven't reviewed minutes yet, but there was no actual, like, oh, we didn't have an exact follow-up action item or a next step or anything like that. I know there were some general questions we had, like, oh, what are some valuation things and, what can we,
I just tried in the minutes
Yeah.
for some of the points we made to keep them, so when we had to go back and revisit this,
Yeah. Right.
some of, so we'd have them in the minutes. That's really my only input at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's.
I wasn't
that's-
sure how we wanted to move
That's a
forward
good, that's a good
myself.
part about minutes, but there was, so oftentimes it'd be like, oh, Paul said he's gonna do this, okay. There was nothing there that I saw that I was supposed to do, so that's good. But that's, I just wanted to bring it up again, because I know we spent a good amount of time on it. I didn't know what we wanted to do with it.
Well, I've taken the liberty to research it a little more, and I've come up with a couple of
Thanks, Joe.
objective criterias for tax factors at tax classification. For example, one could be like residential tax burden, affordability, median single-family tax bill divided by household income, percentage paid into property tax. So, for example, if median tax bill exceeds 3 to 4% of median income, consider shift to commercial. So there's many things you can do. You could share, another example is share the total tax levy by class, right? You can have a metric, percentage of total assessed value versus total percentage of levy taxes paid by class. So that would be an example of, your commercial valuation at 20%, but our receipts are only showing 18%, right? So we would shift the burden there. So I just came up with a few different criterias that the select board could think about. Another one is like historical tax policy, maintain predictability, metrics, past classification and decisions, prior tax factors, impact on small businesses, right? We could evaluate disproportionate effects. Metric, average tax bill by commercial parcel size, And upon further research, I did see that, Auburn, we do have a small business exemption, and I think we could also educate. Are we educating these small businesses about this exemption? How do they apply for the exemption? What are the criterias for it? Yeah, I came up with a bunch of different ones. We could certainly talk more about them next time. I could format this
Yeah.
better, right, into Word, like I just chicken scratch
I was just
here.
going to ask if I could have a copy of it for the minutes.
But I can type this out and I can send it to the.
That'd be great. And I can cut and paste it into the minutes.
Yeah. So if I remember, one of the initial discussions, we had an initial list of maybe 8 to 10 metrics that were suggested to us. And we had a few more that we added in discussion. This would add a few more. So maybe
Yeah.
if we compile all that
Right.
into one master list, if you will, this would maybe be a useful tool so we can collectively can go down and say, that's a good one, that's not a good one, that's,
Right.
that's intuitive, that's not intuitive.
Why don't I put this together and then this could be our base for the next meeting and we could, dissect it, we can add to it and, yeah.
I'm good with that.
Yep, that sounds good. Will you include the handful of bulleted things that Paul had sent us for the last meeting? Because there was a short list.
Yeah, in your memo. I think
Yeah.
it was-
In your memo.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, if you don't, I could just add them to
Okay.
whatever
And
you
then,
send.
and Mary, if you want to go to the January and February minutes, I tried to sum up some of the other concepts or
Okay.
ideas to apply, so I think we'll have quite a loaded,
Oh, okay, right. I mean, it could be same
Maybe
as
some
some
of it might be
suggestions you
consistent,
guys
right.
made.
No, those
I
are-
didn't, yeah.
I mean, if you're willing to do that, I think that'd be a great help.
Okay, yes.
gives us
Yeah.
something to hard,
react
concrete to bite our teeth into.
Right.
Because then my suggestion is at some point, we will have to probably give some sort of correspondence back to the select board, and I'd rather do it with some concrete information, of course. than-
Okay.
Yeah, that's my preference, but up to the committee how they want to handle it. But I think that like a similar letter/memo like we did last time, articulating our thoughts.
Okay.
As an aside, how did that go to the select board? Have they received it? Have we
I think they received it
any?
at the last meeting. I didn't go, so I didn't know if there was discussion or if they
Got it.
just, oftentimes they get, here's your correspondence for the
Yeah.
month, and they don't necessarily
Yeah,
go over
It's
it.
just part of their package.
Yeah, right.
And they, yeah.
But I can, actually, that's a good point. I can follow up with the town manager to
Just
see
out
if they
of
have
curiosity.
reactions.
Great, thanks, Mary.
Yeah, no problem. So then we can just move forward to Director of Economic Development updates.
Okay. Let's see, well, as far as what I talked about in the memo, I did indeed have a conversation with the ULI TAP people this afternoon. Again, to recap, I applied for an assistance grant with the sponsorship of Mass Development. We had an initial positive reaction, but they wanted to scale it down a little bit to focus more on the Auburn Mall / Drury Square area, including Route 12 in that stretch. So that's where we're at. So the conversation today was more about starting to go over some of the logistics. The event itself, the workshop date is going to be June 8th. It'll be a full day event. They'll be doing a lot of things out in the field, looking at the site, meeting with stakeholders, list to be determined. The library, I'm guessing, will be one of the hubs of the day because they're going to need places to go back and forth out of, and of course the library is pretty well situated in that area. And the day will culminate with that project team making a presentation to the select board at their meeting that evening. In between now and the beginning of June, I need to compile a briefing packet, basically summarizing previous planning efforts. Here's our zoning, here's the property data for the parcels within this area. So that's going to be happening, starting now. But that's what's happening. So the moral of the story is we got the grant, we're going to be pursuing it further. This committee, I'm not sure exactly yet how this committee might interface. I mean, the Economic Development Committee is an obvious stakeholder in the town's economic development efforts, and certainly within this corridor. So I don't know if we might, it's very preliminary at this point, but they're going to be conducting interviews through the course of the day. Some of those will be in person, some of those will be in virtual. So maybe at one of the maybe the April meeting, next meeting, we'll have a bit more of an understanding of what they're looking for. And then maybe some of you would be willing to participate, whether it be through a virtual interview, or if you're available during that day at some point to come down, or maybe they're trying to focus it more on the day, otherwise invite them to come to a meeting like this, but they want to focus their work. They want to do a quick in, quick out kind of day. So
What's the purpose of the report to the selectmen on the same day? It sounds sort of like, boom, slam dunk, our job's over.
it is for their end, but then
But why, but what,
then we take their recommendations and work with them. So I'm not an expert in this, but this is based on, there's an old, any architects here? No, okay, so apparently at some French architecture school, back in the 18 whatevers, your final project was, you had one day to do a final project, and you were given the assignment like at dawn that day, and you had to work the whole day to get it done, and then at like a designated time, whoever would come down the work line, and if you didn't drop your plan or in the cart, you didn't become an architect, or whatever. That's a
I
vague.
think just because I don't want to take up a lot of time, because I just want to mention that, and it's funny because I just mentioned this the other night relative to taxes, But, you know, the Renaissance Center was put up in Detroit at the end of the Main Street so that it would bring life and a lot of economic, right? That the whole case study we all did in college from the 60s and the 70s. And what it did, unfortunately, was it sucked all of the life out of Main Street, and the tumbleweeds came and the storefronts all closed. And then down the tubes, the whole city went. And it's been an eyesore for probably well over 30 or 40 years with a lot of crime and depression. So my whole point is that's the first thing I think of when someone says they're just going to come in town, they're going to do their thing for the day, and then go talk to the boss and walk out of town. It's like, where's the ability to sort of, you know, say, gee, where's the pros and cons of this feedback that they just gave us? Like, are we supposed to just live with what they think we should do? That's what I'm trying to, that's what's prompting the question.
I think what Paul's saying is it's just going to inform and give the town something to start from, to react to have those
Right.
conversations.
So again,
right?
I'm sorry for the poor
Yeah,
job.
I'm not sure what that's what I was trying to understand, what they're going to, it's just they're going to do an assessment, and they're just going to say, this is our assessment? Is that what you're saying? Because that's what I hear Lindsay saying.
Again, that's the scope of the
Yeah.
grant award. That is correct.
Okay.
But, again, sorry I've done a poor job of explaining this previously, but what the idea is, this sets us up for applying for future grants. So
Right.
if
Okay.
they identify, I'm just throwing out, for instance, one of the things we're going to look at, are there financial tools and incentives that we could offer to develop target sites?
Okay.
So they're not going to develop, here's your incentive. They're going to say, you should look at these kind of incentives. Then it'll be up to staff and/or future grants to construct whatever that incentive might be. Or maybe it's a zoning recommendation. They're not going to change our zoning. They're going to say, you should look at your zoning, and then the planning board will then start to look at that zoning.
This does clarify it, because what it does now is, now I have an understanding that if they were to approach us or look at myself and say, would you like to participate in this, would you be, I know the kind of feedback they'd be looking for. I don't think I was quite as clear
Yeah, I
as
don't-
what their role was until now.
Okay, I'm glad I can explain it a little further. And I actually don't, I've never done this kind of program with that before, so
Right.
I don't know yet what their
Right.
questions are going to be.
But that's why I
Yeah,
went. Sometimes, you know, we do all this work, and then it's completely out of our reach, and then somebody ends up with a final product, and you're like, well, you know, and I've seen it happen in different scenarios, so
Yeah.
that's why I thought of that.
No, it's great. And I mean, I'm not an apologist or a spokesman for ULI, but what they like to do is take these studies and apply them to other communities. You know, so that, you know, so they keep building their work.
Right.
They say this works here, this hasn't worked here. You might look at this, you might look at that.
And it
So-
sheds more light on why
Right.
they changed the scope.
Right.
Because they want to be able to go to places where they can get feedback.
Right.
And the scope before didn't offer all that.
Right, and the benefit to
Right.
us, beyond, you know, getting some ideas, is we are getting financial experts, we are getting architectural experts. These aren't people, I'm not saying that they therefore know everything, but that's not expertise we have, certainly within staff. And so they might have some different ideas that they've seen in, you know, in the development community that, you know, we didn't think of here in Auburn. And so it's just a stage for future work. So so it's not like a, you know, dine and dash or, you know, something like that. But it does set up follow-up work, for sure.
And I'll be the first to say, this isn't one of my specialties, and between the pamphlet and everything else, I was sort of getting like, okay, I was trying to keep apples and oranges separated, so some of it did overlap, and I'll be the first person to say, I don't want to agree and make it look like I know what I'm saying. I'll be the first one to come up and raise a flag and say, hey, step back a second, because I want to make sure I understand this before I move forward.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, and again, I appreciate that kind of feedback, because a lot of these staff-driven projects, you know, if we're just thinking about, what does a planner think about this? Or what does a staff person in DDS think about this? That's important, but how does it relate to someone who's maybe somewhat educated about the world, but doesn't know about this process? So what kind of questions would they ask? What kind of things do you notice? And so that's why I think it's valuable. So I'd always appreciate that kind of feedback. But, you know, I'll continue to post, I'll keep you posted on this. I hope to have more information, of course, at the next meeting. But that's, wanted to set the stage for that, so that's some good news there. We already talked about the permitting guide that's underway. And the other thing I can report is I'm not sure what
Do
I
we
said.
have a planner?
I'm not sure what I said at the last meeting or not, but we have an offer letter in someone's hands, and so I am hopeful that they call us back now. But I'm optimistic that you know, I had a verbal conversation with them before we submitted the letter, and so I'm optimistic, you know, that they can work out the numbers with the town manager. But I'm optimistic we'll have someone on board in the very near future, and my life will get a little more less complicated. Similarly, we also have, just for what it's worth, because it touches this somewhat, as you know, there's also a vacancy for the land use coordinator position. That's part of the Inspectional Services Department. They handle more of the conservation and the zoning board part of things. Conducted a series of interviews this week, and we have some strong candidates there too, and I expect an offer to be made imminently. So, meaning I get to focus more on economic development as opposed to some of the other boards I've been helping support over the past couple of months. So the sooner we get people on board, the sooner we can train them up and we can get them off and running. So that's, and then also the last part of that, which is the most relevant perhaps for this committee, the town manager has directed me to look at our economic development coordinator job description, just to see if it needs any updating, but we're going to release that in the very near future as well. So,
Does the land use position also affect us? I think it does, right?
well,
So
it affects,
is-
I mean, it affects us and it's part of the Inspectional Services Department.
All right, okay.
And they lend some administrative support to what's going on. But again, we want to make sure all our staff at least have knowledge of what the other boards and committees are doing. But primarily, it'll be me working with this committee and also, again, any future economic development coordinator, sort of I guess, Brooke's old role, if you want to look at it that way, for those of you who worked with Brooke previously. So that's, yeah, so it's, it'd be nice to have my staff up and running.
Excuse my ignorance, is land use coordinator, is that a role that previously existed?
The
in
position has been here for a couple of years, to my
Okay.
knowledge. It's not a position I've had in other towns,
Okay.
but it's kind of a hybrid of a conservation agent
Yeah.
and an administration, staff support kind of thing.
Okay.
So it's kind of a bit of a hybrid role. We have a bunch of those here in Auburn, hybrid roles. But that's what, yeah, so it's not a new position, but it's not a common position
I see.
that I've seen in a lot of communities.
Okay.
A lot of communities, once you get to Auburn size, will work towards getting a full-time conservation agent who works full-time on conservation issues with the Conservation Commission. I'm not sure we're headed there yet. I haven't heard any issues about that, but that's primarily what that role supports.
Yeah, got it. Not much left to conserve.
But anything, but yes, but true. But the other important part of Conservation Commission is they deal with the Wetlands Act. And so anything that gets developed, a lot of Auburn is in protected areas of some kind or another, or an aquifer protection zone of some kind or another. So inevitably things get the conservation, even if you're, putting up a Dunkin' Donuts or something. So if there's no other questions, that's still.
Is there any update on Starbucks? Is that moving forward? Or?
Yeah, I can say that the planning board is actively, we had an executive session about it the other night, so I can't get into details, but I can just say there's active negotiation.
movement.
Yeah, and there's a near final agreement being crafted. So, in the near future. So we know, I didn't report this last time, it is out of the court hands right now. So it's not going to litigation at the moment.
That's good.
Because this agreement is being discussed. So basically, it's the lawyers talking, and the respective lawyers coming back to their clients, in our case, counsel coming back to the planning board saying, hey, here's the latest, is this heading in the right direction? Are these the details you wanted, et cetera? And so we've gone through a few different meetings with that, so it seems to be getting closer to a final resolution.
That's a relief.
Whether it'll happen before our next meeting, I don't know. But
Thank you so much for the update. Next is the approval of minutes. So the minutes of the February 12th, 2026 meetings have been distributed. Any corrections?
I just want to Madam Chair, I just want to clarify, hold on, I think everyone has copies of it, but I attached a draft copy to your email that went out. However, then Patrick this morning provided an updated version, so it's not the one that says draft on it.
It's the one that's in the director updates. It just says a district local technical assistance Auburn Mall study. I was alluding to it, but I realized after I went back that I was doing them, and in my head I knew that's what I was saying, but I didn't spell it out. So we got that, and thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that looks
It
good.
was so funny. I went back and looked at it, and I said, "Oh, I thought that was there when I wrote it."
I read that sentence 3 times and I'm like, I still don't know what this means.
No, I know. I knew what it
Let me
meant.
message Patrick.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye. Madam Chair, I didn't bring it up in my report, and this is the last thing I had because it was in the packets. I attached a business survey, and maybe there's not much to say about it right now. It came up in a couple of different contexts recently with the chamber and with, what was the other context? I forget what we were talking about. Anyway, I just didn't know, it's more of an informational for me. For the folks who've been on the committee when Brooke was here, was there any discussion or any movement on doing a business survey at any point?
I feel like we have seen
discussed it.
two different
Yeah.
rounds of this
Okay.
in the however many years I've been on this
Okay.
committee. And I know when Shannon was here, she ran one that was like pretty intensive.
Okay.
And that was like, I think it was like SurveyMonkey. It was
Okay.
more in depth than this. And then I was aware that Brooke had compiled this, but I don't think she got many hits.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember a meeting where she said she got like maybe 3 responses.
Okay.
So,
Because part of the reason I bring it up is because I found that survey in the
Yeah.
files, but I was not able to find any compiled results or a report. And I agree, it seemed like Shannon had done something, and then maybe
Yeah.
Brooke had done something.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of more for my information, tapping this group to see if you remembered anything. That actually helps a little bit to know that
Right,
it wasn't a
yeah.
figment of anyone's imagination.
No.
But just maybe this wasn't a lot of traction, perhaps.
yeah.
Okay.
I also don't delete any emails, so I can look, not right this second, but I can look back to see if I still have anything from Shannon, because I really remember she gave us, we like looked at the SurveyMonkey thing and gave her a bunch of feedback, and then I swear she showed us like a report with
Okay.
results, but it was a while ago, so it may not be that useful anymore.
No, I don't want to get into, I don't just want to do like survey for the sake of doing a survey, or
Yeah.
that's what we're supposed to do, so let's do it. But I'm just sort of getting at some point, we're talking about what kind of businesses we want to see,
Right.
and what happened in 2019 pre-COVID or whatever might it be different than we are now. I don't know. That's why I was hoping that, I even reached out to the chamber because it seems like this one in your hands might have gone to the chamber at some point. But they said they had talked about it, but they don't remember anything coming of it either. So
Yeah.
I can have to run a little more to see if there are results, but Lindsay, certainly if you can check your
Yeah, I'll look back and
emails and
see
see
if I
if there's
can
anything there.
find anything.
I mean, don't hurt yourself, but
I won't.
But if something there, please forward it to me and
Yeah.
I can review it.
I'd be happy to do that,
Appreciate
yeah.
that.
Paul, will you be the person who will contact the town, the select board of selectmen for June 8th to make sure that there's a placeholder on their agenda
Oh,
for
Dorian
that?
is. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, I know there's a thing about knowing now, and then when the week that date happens, making sure that it's there.
We'll certainly
That's why I
make,
mentioned.
yeah,
Yeah.
we'll certainly be making sure of that. Thank you, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That was it. Thank you, Lindsay. That was what I had.
Yeah.
That was my last, I guess that's new business, but.
There we go. Any other new business?
I just wanted to ask about the Robert Goddard
Oh,
event this
I
weekend.
neglected to mention, yeah. So with the Goddard event is happening this weekend, so from the last time I checked, the weather's going to be positive for Saturday, positive in that it's not going to be raining. So my understanding is there's a dedication at the park at 10:30 on Saturday morning. I know that 'cause I have to be there. And also through the day, there's going to be food trucks and events, a lot of it centered around the library. And then on Monday, my understanding is, weather permitting, of course, there's going to be a series of rocket launches, including a recreation of the Goddard launch during the day on Monday.
Nice.
But I understand that the rain might be an issue, and that might affect whether rockets can be happening or not.
A plug for going to the library on Saturday at whatever time, because there'll be there's I think an astronaut coming to meet with people, and you can ask
Yeah, I think it was
questions.
astronaut Sacco, who was a
Yeah.
retired professor and was.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Yeah,
really
yeah.
interesting. They're gonna be playing a documentary by Luke. It's like Lucasfilm made a documentary about Robert Goddard. So they're gonna be playing that. We have a whole exhibit set up in
I saw
partnership with
post the
the.
picture that.
Yeah, in partnership with the Historical Society. So all old portraits and things that have been lost belong in storage at the library, hidden away. They're all back up and in the Merriam room, so it'll be, if you have kids, there's like gonna be kid-centric, you know, STEM type activities. So I think it's gonna be really fun.
Yeah, so the dedication for the park is at 10:30, then walk over to the library
come on
afterwards. Get a taco or whatever's at the food truck.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for reminding, I neglected to mention it, so thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
So we'll see you there. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so next, if no other new business, we can schedule our next meeting. I think we were saying like the second Tuesday?
Second Thursday, be the 9th, April 9th.
That would be perfect. Because after that Thursday, I'm not available. That's the day before the warrant articles, so I'm around.
Yes.
Yeah. Or just after the warrant articles, rather, on our board.
So we're going to April 9th, is that right?
Yes.
6 PM here?
6 p.m.
Works.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. I guess we'll see you then. Well, no, we're not adjourned, sorry. Sorry.
If there is no other.
Can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
Absolutely.
I will second. I will third.
Sorry.
No, we're good.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
6:59, great.
Are we off?
Solid hour.